crystals of the demerara because those will dissolve. Because once it pulls the juices out, that'll make the sugar dissolve. A pinch of salt. I'm gonna add some vanilla extract. Not in the ingredient list, but something we want in here. A couple teaspoons. And I'm gonna grab my cinnamon. I'm gonna go with like a half a teaspoon. I think it'll be plenty. And now I might add just a splash of apple cider vinegar. I considered lemon juice.
Yeah, that's what I would normally go with.
That little jolt of acidity from like a vinegar or lemon juice helps to just bring out the flavor. And these are pretty sweet, so I think that'll help balance it out. Call it a half a teaspoon. Now I want to just toss all this together. One ingredient that I'm thinking about, I put this in apple pie recipes sometimes, but I don't know if I want to use cocktail bitters. I like using orange bitters or Angostura bitters because it's kind of like adding soy sauce to a recipe. It's like an aged product that kind of flavors the background of everything. It adds like a little jewel tone and it's just these sort of like unidentifiable complex flavors. I kind of do want to add it. And I think also it'll help warm up the color a little bit.
What is jewel tone?
Jewel tone? Just like a very rich, deep color. Referred to as like jewel tone. Yeah.
I thought that was some sort of flavor term.
No, just like a very saturated, rich color that's like a ruby or a sapphire or an emerald.
Like a jewel.
These are aromatic bitters. It kind of smells like root beer, like bark, in a good way. It's very brown though. Let me see if we have Angostura. Angostura is like red. Aha. Okay, so I'm gonna add maybe a teaspoon of the Angostura bitters. It smells like warm spice and like clove and I don't know, just a lot of really good stuff. So I'm gonna drizzle this over. Maybe a little more, maybe a teaspoon and a half. Okay, so you see how it's kind of reddish. The mixture's already looking kind of wet and there's already some juices pooling at the bottom. I wanna cover this and I wanna let this just sit and, as we say, macerate. So it's meaning like, let it sit in contact with sugar until the juices are drawn out. So I'm gonna kind of compact everything down into the center and cover it with plastic to prevent browning. Set these apples aside. Let's have lunch.
Cut.
So the apples have been macerating for a little while. The cooking is going to be kind of like a shallow poach, sort of. Hey, it is kind of golden hued, which is nice. So I'm going to put everything in here. And I might add a splash of water because, of course, there's going to be some evaporation. And now I'm just going to cook these over the stove on sort of like medium heat, I guess. And I just want them to look softened and translucent so they'll lose that like raw crunch texture. I forgot that a couple weeks ago I got an induction, like a single induction burner, portable, for just this purpose so I don't have to keep moving back and forth. This is a good chance for me to taste this and see if I need to change the balance of anything, like add sugar, add cinnamon. I'm gonna turn it down a little bit because I don't need it to boil that vigorously. I don't want to evaporate so much of the liquid. The bitters are good. I think the cinnamon is good. The bitters and the cinnamon together do something really cool. Like it makes it really spicy in a good way. I think I want to add a little more vinegar to up the acidity a bit. I don't really feel like it needs more sugar. It's pretty sweet as it is. So I gotta keep going. It's just
Interesting.
simmering. So here's what happened. I cooked all the apples. They're translucent and they're soft, but I didn't have them covered. And literally all of the liquid evaporated. In the case of making of like pastry and filling, that's actually a good thing to have like low liquid. But I want some liquid so I can add cornstarch and thicken it to make the kind of like connective tissue of the filling. The original ingredient list had apple juice in it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the apples out, put them back in the bowl. There's a faster way to do this. I'm gonna take about a cup of the apple juice. I'm going to warm it up in the skillet. I'm gonna also melt into it
Butter.
maybe 2 tablespoons of butter, just sort of thinking about what seems like the right amount. Maybe more like a tablespoon and a half. I think it needs some of the richness of the butter to kind of round it out. Then I'm gonna grab a little bowl and a couple of teaspoons of, just trying to decide how much, oh, I didn't turn it on. This is gonna warm up. So I'm just trying to think of how much cornstarch do I need. I think a tablespoon is probably too much. I'll start with a couple teaspoons. Then I'll dissolve that in 2 tablespoons of the apple juice. Stir that with a fork. This is my cornstarch slurry. You always need to dissolve cornstarch in a little bit of liquid before you add it to a greater amount of liquid, otherwise it'll like clump up. I don't really need to reduce this, I don't think. If I reduce it, I'm worried it's gonna be too sweet. I mean, there's no sugar added, but I don't wanna add too much sweetness. So now that this is up to a simmer, I'm gonna add my cornstarch slurry, whisk it in. It's not really thickening it. It's weird. I didn't add enough. It's a little thickened. I didn't have enough thickening power. I'm gonna add more cornstarch. Another 2 teaspoons. Maybe the fat's doing something to it. Let's see. There we go. It's a little bit thinner than I was picturing, but I don't think I actually want to add any more cornstarch because there's going to be, because there's a lattice and there's like the slits in the lattice, there's going to be evaporation during baking. So this will further thicken or lose more moisture. So now what I want to do is I want to add some of this mixture back into my apples, and I'm just going to add enough that I feel like the mixture is bound and the apples are kind of like coated in it. I still want it to be mostly apples. So I like how they look really nice and glossy. So I think that'll do it. That looks really good to me. So now I want to taste it and go in with any adjustments. I'm glad I added the butter. I like the amount of vinegar. It's not too sweet. I think maybe it could use a little more cinnamon. So I'm going to add just another 1/4 teaspoon. Half of it just flew over. Just fold that in. Yum. Okay. I'm happy with this. I'm going to stick this mixture in the fridge so it can get cold. It's going to help me during assembly.
She has like the most muted reactions to so many things. And you just, you know it's fucking just delicious.
The other one's still in the fridge.
Honestly,
First
I
one
kind
I
of
want
want
the
to bake
bottom,
off.
which is just going to stay as like its flat piece. And I have a piece of parchment paper on a sheet tray, so I just want it to be kind of the dimensions of the sheet tray, and I'm going to try to do like 4, like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, all from the same sheet. This dough is a little bit wetter than when I make pie dough. It's going to create a little bit more elasticity in the dough, and I think it's actually going to help me with the lattice. It also makes it easier to roll out. The shape isn't very even, but I'm trying to get the thickness really even. A little bit stuck right there on that end. I just want to get this onto my prepared baking sheet and back into the fridge so it stays nice and cold. So the filling is not, it's not cold, but it's not at all warm. It's cool, which is good. If this were warm, I would need to pause and let this cool off more before I would have put this on the pastry. So I need a 4 centimeter wide like tunnel. So I'm going to cut 3 centimeters wide. It's going to pipe something that's sort of circular, and then I'll like flatten it down. I'm going to do a little test. The whole thing is 12 centimeters long, so about 11 centimeters by 4. I think this looks pretty good. Maybe I even want a slightly bigger opening. And then I can use like my little offset to sort of thin it out. I think that looks good. I mean, it's pretty good. I'm going to cut an even slightly larger opening. Feels nice and cold.
Bold and risky.
What I should do is actually make some marks for myself though, just as far as where the filling is going to go. It's just going to help me, I think, place them. So far I feel really good about this. I feel good about the height, the dimensions, the texture of the filling, the amount of apples. It's like actually a lot of apple fit into a small space. And I'm just going to keep going and do all 8. This is going to go back in the fridge. I'm going to pull out the second piece of pastry, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll it out. This piece feels a little firmer, like a little less wet, a little better mixed. When I divided them, I probably had like more of the dough that was on the bottom of the food processor bowl on one side, and then that was the wetter one. It's gonna be a little easier to roll out without sticking. The rectangles need to be about 6 centimeters wide, and I'm gonna say 12 centimeters long. 24 by 24. So I actually need something kind of square. So I think I'm at a good thickness. It's okay for me to cut rectangles larger than I need. So that's what I'm going to do, just to make sure I have plenty of room to work.
Does she have one of those latticers, like things that does the lattice for you, or is she going to do it herself?
I want to
probably do it herself.
Get most of this back into the fridge. So I'm going to transfer these pieces to my little sheet tray here with parchment. But I'm going to leave one out, and that's the one that I'm going to use to sort of make my mini game plan for how to form the lattice. So what I want to do is kind of establish a little bit of a midline because there's some overlap. So I'm just using my paring knife to cut some slits. It's a little tedious to do this on each one. You sort of accordion the pastry. It's very delicate. And you sort of stretch it over the filling. And I might not have to even really pull it apart much more than this because it'll shrink and kind of continue to separate in the oven. I think what I need to do is I actually need to make further slits. And this is going to help the elasticity a bit. So see how I get a little bit more stretch with the ends cut? I want to see if I can roll this out again and try again and do another test. Oh, the rolling pin's wet. Disaster. Okay. Part of me wishes that I had a tool where instead of cutting through the pastry, I could punch. So rather than using the knife, I watch a lot of cleaning videos on Instagram, and sometimes I buy the stuff that they use, thinking my house will be that clean. And so one thing I bought was like a set of scrapers that come with plastic razor blades for like scraping stuff off. And so that's what this is, and I cut it. It's a plastic razor blade. But it's kind of perfect. I'm just testing this out. I think I'm figuring it out. I think this is not going to be perfect, but here I have on my sample 5 lines on this side, 4 on that side. I made them a little too far apart. See how these are a little thinner? What I would want to do is just make these little cuts to help me open it up. It's getting a little soft because it's been sitting out, but like that's pretty good. I have to make them a little closer together, but I successfully got sort of like the 5 on one side, the 4 on the other. The first thing I'm going to do is going to beat an egg because I want to have that done before I move on to assembly. Okay. I'm going to grab the pastry, the squares. I'm going to keep the other ones on the baking sheet, and that's going to help actually to keep them cold because the baking sheet is cold. With my 7 remaining squares, I'm going to basically do exactly what I did here, making this a little bit closer together, but using the exact same technique. I'm going to grab the bottom crust and the filling from the fridge and start to assemble. Okay. One positive thing to note is that the filling didn't spread. That cornstarch mixture is nice and tight. So the egg wash I have is the glue that's going to keep the lattice and the bottom crust together. And I'm going to use my pastry brush just to wash along the edges, right along the filling. Thin layer. Actually, maybe I'll just do a couple at a time so the egg doesn't totally dry. I feel like it looks really good. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
It does look really good.
1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Now I'm just going to press. And now I'm going to trim away just some of the excess. What I really need are these. I might just try to flatten the filling a little bit. So now I'm just going to keep going. Same technique of just kind of draping that lattice top piece over the bottom with that egg wash. I do have one concern. The concern is that the surface of the lattice top has dried out a bit from the flour, and sometimes that can cause cracking, like you just see that in the oven after it bakes. So what I want to do is I'm going to rinse my pastry brush. Maybe I'll just spray it. I'm just going to spray like mist from a distance, a little water to try to hydrate the surface. I think that'll help, I really do. And now what I want to do is just go back in and really press firmly to make sure I have full contact with the pastry on all 4 sides of every single individual pie. I think that mist really helped actually. It feels more hydrated. Okay, while those are freezing, I'm going to preheat the oven. They only really need to freeze for like as long as the oven takes to preheat. And I'm gonna preheat to 350. I want like a nice sort of medium steady baking temp for these. I don't need like a blast of hot air because I want to initiate, puffing, because there's gonna be something like flaky and layered. It's just gonna kind of bake like medium and steady. The oven's at 325, it has to just come up to 350. So I'm gonna grab the sheet tray from the freezer and start to trim them and make sure they're all nicely formed. I think the move actually is to separate them all and then trim them individually. This is why I like freezing pastry, you get these really clean lines. It's not frozen solid, obviously, but it's really cold. Okay, so these are definitely too big. So I have to go through and trim each one to size and see how they're very different in size. I might also get a fresh piece of parchment because this one got a little wet, although maybe it's fine. I'll just get a sill pad, maybe I'll do that. They might end up a little bit wider than I originally intended, but I think that's okay. They don't feel soft, but they also don't feel, they've kind of like thawed quickly from being out of the freezer. Do I want to put them back in the freezer for 5 minutes? Maybe I do. I don't think I want to do egg wash because I think they're going to look, I think it's going to make them like too burnished looking. But the question is, do I want to do a little heavy cream? Because it's going to also help to hydrate the surface. And then it adds a little bit of fat, a little bit of sugar, and it browns. I could even do milk. Maybe I'll do milk. I think this is the right call. Milk, which is mostly water, but has, a little bit of fat and some lactose in it. It's not going to make it brown excessively, and it's going to also help hydrate that surface a little bit. The concern is that if it's really dry, it's just going to get cracked looking in the oven. Freezer for 5. Come on, kitty, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. Oh. There's a little Rango cat.
Oh, he's such a big boy.
Okay.
He's missing an eye.
Sorry, cat. Okay. All right, I'm gonna put the apple pies in the oven. I think they're cold enough. Oh God, Ringo. Oh, kitty, you gotta move. Kitty, you gotta move. Go to Uncle Cal. Go to Uncle Cal. Kitty, oh my God, are we gonna have to do this? Just go up here for now. Yeah, good, okay.
You're afraid he'll climb in the oven?
I just don't want him anywhere near the oven at all. Okay. I'm gonna set the timer for 15 and then I'll check. And I'm just gonna keep a close eye on it. I don't know how long they're gonna take. Okay, we'll see. Right, kitty? They look so good. There's been some nice, gentle puffing of the dough. They're very pale. They need to stand for longer. I wanna get some nice golden color on them, but they look incredible. I'm so excited. They look so good. Glad I did that milk. I think it helped to encourage just very nice and even browning. I like how in some places the filling bubbled up a little bit, but it stayed put. There's no big air gaps. They didn't shrink too much. I feel like they look delicious and so good. So these are obviously hot. I'm gonna transfer them to a cooling rack to cool, but we'll come back and taste. Here, should we just look at the bottom real quick? Nice.
Looks like it was on a conveyor belt.
In a good way, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna do a little side-by-side comparison. Here's theirs. Obviously a homemade one is gonna look better. One comment on mine is there are vastly different sizes. I thought I was trimming them evenly, but obviously some are much bigger than others. The size is not exact, and it's also not consistent. I sort of picked one that was like the closest in size. They're all a little bit longer than the McDonald's ones, and some of them are much wider. I think the lattice was like super successful. The weight feels similar. Mine is definitely heavier, but mine also has way more apples in it. Mine also probably has slightly thicker layers of pastry. The pastry did puff a little bit, and look at how nice and caramelized the bottom is comparatively. Really beautiful golden brown. So I'm gonna cut it in half just to take a look. There's a lot of apples packed into those halves. I love the browning, and the pastry on top is like fully cooked through, lightly golden, and there's a little bit of flakiness, which I'm happy to see. It's not overly spiced. It even could have a touch more cinnamon. The apples are nice and soft, but they're not mushy. And most importantly, you get this really nice buttery pastry flavor. It's like tons of fine little layers. If I were making these to my own specifications rather than to the McDonald's pie. I'd probably bake them for a little bit longer, get even a little more color on them. I also wouldn't mind maybe like a little sugar on top, but then that changes the surface texture and so it doesn't look the same, but super delicious. I would make this. I would make this and like just have these as a dish, a little apple hand pie. So good. The apple pie you make at home is always going to be better than the one you buy, I think. And it's so rooted in like pastry technique and just I've made a bunch of apple pie, so this is really satisfying. So more like this would be great, but we're always taking suggestions, so we'll have more episodes for you. Leave comments below, and thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Don't tell me what to do. Blind test on
We've
pizza.
gathered 3 professional
wow.
chefs to blind taste test every supermarket frozen pizza brand we could get our hands on to see which ones meet their standards. All pizzas have been prepared following the cooking instructions in the back of their packaging. DiGiorno 4-cheese rising crust pizza.
Well, it's a little thick.
It's puffy, a little bit crispy. It reminds me of America. It's like the smell of commercial cheese.
I think I know what this is. Oh, yeah.
So when you're looking at frozen pizza, you would want there to be a crispier bottom. You don't want something that's soggy.
You want that pizza snap, you know what I mean? When you bite into
They
a
don't
bite.
ever
So
have
that
snap.
when you go to pick it up, it stays flat.
Definitely having a seasoned crust that has fermentation notes to it.
The right amount of yeast and salt. I would like to have a great quality cheese.
I want
Nope.
it to be a little oily and the consistency to be even throughout the whole entire pizza.
Nothing like dry and doesn't melt.
Not artificial cheese, not cheese product.
I would like to have a nice tomato flavor. Have to be a right amount of acidity.
Enough tang that complements the cheese.
If it tastes like a pizza more than it does like a cheese toast, that would be incredible.
It's very doughy.
The crust definitely is on a little bit of the bland side.
The fermentation time might have been a little off. The longer it sits, the more flavor it is going to have.
So those are docking marks. When you make a dough that you're not going to ferment properly, you got to put holes in it with a docker so that it doesn't bubble up.
Doesn't really taste the freshness of cheese.
This doesn't remind me of like mozzarella. It doesn't give me that gooey texture.
The tomato, I taste the sugar. I don't recommend it on my pizza. I don't like it.
I think that it's a little too thin, the sauce.
90% sure this is DiGiorno rising crust.
He knows
There's no
it.
mistaking this crust right here. Rising crust, I called it.
Oh, it was delivered. 4 cheese, Parmesan, Asiago, Romano. I don't taste any of those cheeses.
I see the datum and the baking soda.
Datum is put into
Ugh.
a lot of frozen pizzas, which is going to help the overall gluten expand. I think they did a really good job at that, and that's about it.
I personally wouldn't bother. This is akin to a criminal act. But if it's your thing, you know, if it gets your rocks off, go for it.
Trader Joe's
You're just
pizza
so
margarita.
cheap, you know.
It's thinner.
This one is extremely flat.
It looks like
It's like a
chicken
flatbread. It's not.
tortilla.
It's not
Looks
pizza
a little
either.
rough.
Smell is very strong. There's definitely garlic.
The par baked marks on these are there. They'll par bake the crust slightly so that the raw tomatoes and raw cheese bake evenly.
This crust is very crispy.
I don't taste a lot of flavor on the crust.
This crust is like, it's a fugazi.
I think that the tomatoes in this, it's more of a paste as opposed to like a sauce.
Tomato pasty with dehydrated garlic and dry basil. One of the things that makes Italian food so great and pizza so great is the simplicity of the whole thing. Too many people think like, oh, it couldn't be that easy, so we gotta like mess around with it. This is a very good example of that.
I think that this cheese is good quality cheese. It melted really well.
Pizza, margarita, Trader what?
Trader Joe's?
What is this?
Trader
It's not
Giotto, they're
frozen,
we're not
They
racist.
came
I
to
swear to
Italy,
God.
Those guys. Oh,
They don't
product
have
of
Trader
Italia.
Jose anymore,
Nice.
though.
When you
At
think
least
of
they did
Neapolitan
that.
pizza, you think of margarita pizza. That's probably the first thing you learn.
Named after Queen Margarita.
It's the first pizza that was invented from 1889. They represent the Italian flag. Fresh tomato, fresh mozzarella, fresh basil.
I mean, this is not a margarita pizza, but
It's not so bad.
For a frozen pizza, that is.
give me Elio over that any day. Like, Elio does a good job.
Elio's cheese pizza.
Oh, it's a square.
Is that the guy?
Looks nice.
4 sides, no crust.
I will not call it pizza.
It's pretty terrible, but it tastes like childhood. You'll probably die if you eat too many of them, but you know, whatever.
No crispy bottom here.
Yeah, it's a little bit mushy. It's soft.
Zero fermentation on it. There's no crumb structure. The different holes and the bubbles. It's like akin to like eating like a bowl of flour.
The dough should be more hydrated. The hydration will make the dough more light, easy to digest.
It's a good, robust sauce, but
Doesn't have fresh tomato flavor.
definitely being overpowered by some grated cheese.
The cheese doesn't even melt. Doesn't feel like good cheese.
When the pizza is in the freezer too long, the enzymes and the culture at that point are being broken down and you're losing the flavor from the cheese.
Ah, it's Ilios.
Ilios is definitely one of the top 5 childhood memories I have.
This isn't trying to be something it's not. It's just trying to be Ilios. So we're straight Ilios. Like, don't come after me or anything. Like, I'm not trying to cause any problems over here.
Red Baron, 4 cheese pizza.
We definitely have 2 different cheeses on this one.
I can totally see the cheddar.
What is this yellow stuff?
So the crust here, it's a little crispy on the bottom. It has a good taste.
There is some flavor on the dough. It's lighter than the one I tried before.
This is definitely too much cheese.
It's very cheesy pizza. What is that, 4 cheese? It's very oily, greasy.
I think this is lacking a little bit of tomato flavor just because the cheese is so strong. I think it is overpowering the sauce.
When you put so many ingredients on the pizza, you lose other flavors.
It tastes like Chef Boyardee.
Ah.
Oh, Red Baron.
4 cheese.
Cheddar, provolone, mozzarella, and parmesan.
Oh my God. This thing has like 20,000 ingredients in it.
8 grams of sugars.
Contains bioengineered food ingredients. Great.
Amy's cheese pizza.
I kind of really like the way this pizza looks already.
Looks nice.
Amy's makes
like an
decent
emoji.
products, but they're
It
usually
has a really good smell.
It's crispy.
Crust is very good. Has a lot of flavor.
The mozzarella, this one, is more filante. Filante that pulls.
It's very like light on the sauce.
They cooked the tomato like a ragu. Tomato sauce have to be fresh. No cooking process, no sugar.
I know there's gonna be an Amy's here. I like Amy's. I want them to be good, but if this is you, Amy, like, I expected better out of you. Ha ha!
he knew it.
This is organic.
It's excited to see this pizza. I tried it like 11 years ago.
It says here a hand-stretched wheat crust.
You know what?
Wheat flour, it's less process. That's why it gives more flavor. It's a good pizza, this one.
Great value microwavable cheese pizza.
The smell is very rich.
This definitely looks like a tortilla. No crunch at all.
Squishy. Squish, squish.
It's very gummy.
The cheese stacks on your teeth.
There definitely is
It
some
stucks on
strands
your
that haven't
teats?
melted all the way through, so they might be using imitation cheese here.
If I'm at a gas station in a pinch and you hand me one of these in the middle of the desert, I could get down with this.
I will not call that pizza.
Oh, yeah.
Great value. I don't know about any value, but
What is this, Walmart?
microwavable. That's probably why it's soft.
Microwave pizza, never had it before.
Sodium aluminum sulfates. That's what every growing boy needs.
Uh.
A little teaspoon of aluminum.
I will not give it to my kids too. I don't have it, but it's even.
California Pizza Kitchen. Margarita crispy thin crust pizza.
It's nice, it's crispy, it's thin. I like it the way it looks.
I see the fresh tomatoes on here.
So this pizza has no sauce. It's just chunks of tomatoes.
They definitely cannot call margherita. Margherita is only one ingredient, tomato, and not tomato and cherry tomato. I'm super purist. I'm 3rd generation of pizzaiolo napoletano, so just let you imagine my grandfather what he would think.
Yeah, I got really excited when I saw these tomatoes, but they're definitely not fresh and have a little sour tang to them.
The mozzarella doesn't really have much flavor.
It's not my favorite crust. It doesn't have a lot of fermentation on this dough.
When you're looking at really thin pizza, the whole idea